Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Brian if you're new around here, and for returning subscribers, you unlock a title of Epic Engineer of Ingenuity. Feel free to use that at your local Home Depot and Lowe's and see if it lands you any new jobs and or contracts, or just get you a couple, raising eyebrows or two. Guys, today I want to talk about my experience with Zadnor and Bozja. Overall, there's going to be a theme that you'll see in this video talking about how this content has completely changed how I view Stormblood. And if you've been following my content for any period of time, you'll note that I felt Stormblood was lacking in a couple of key areas. And I think that with this content itself, with the raids, that it really changes my experience of that expansion for the better. And so that's what I want to sit down and talk to you guys today about. But hopefully you guys let me know what your experience has been so far. There's a lot of things I want to address in this video, like why it took me so long to start playing this content, what I really like about this content, what I hope for this content going forward, especially as we get ready for Endwalker. And that's going to be the core of this video. I am going to show video footage of the zone. So just note that if you're spoiler sensitive to bosses, that might show up in this video itself. So just kind of be warned. I'm not going to talk about the story itself, so I'm not really going to dive into spoiler territory, but I just wanted to give you that light warning just in case, and that way you can bounce out if you choose to, and I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Now, before we dive into the core of the content, I want to sit down and say, starting in September, we're making changes to the podcast. We've been running and dual streaming the podcast on Ginger Gaming Radio and Ginger Prime, or Ginger Gaming Radio and Work to Game. In September, all of that's going to just live on Ginger Gaming Radio. So if you guys haven't subscribed yet to the podcast channel and want to tune in for the live shows and or highlights, the top link in the description of these videos, especially as I kind of build up through August to try to get the word out, will be for that channel. Hopefully you go check it out, and hopefully you continue to join in on the live shows as much as you enjoy the highlights as well. So thank you guys for the support, but I just wanted to get that PSA out of the way. Zadnor and Bozja, or Zandalor as I like to say on stream, is some of my most enjoyed content so far in Final Fantasy XIV. I feel that it builds off of the expectation and the experience since A Realm Reborn has launched. Now, if you guys have been following, Stormblood wasn't my favorite expansion. I felt like it was always really lacking that conflict, that war, that sense of, just two major forces coming together and one continually to have to make up ground. I thought that was a big theme of Stormblood. It never felt like we got to that point. We had the raids, and the Evilise raids, I think by far, in the history of my experience with 14, has been my most favorite edition of the raid scene. Crystal Tower ranking in number 2, and now looking forward to the Myths of the Realm. I'm really excited to see what Endwalker does and how that changes my overall raid rankings. But when it comes down to it, that was definitely a highlight for me. And the fact that that builds off and builds up into this content, into this zone, into this story, I really appreciate how interconnected everything is when it comes to this raid and when it comes to all these internal raids that we've got. Some of the best raid content, by the way. I really have enjoyed both Deliberum. I really enjoyed Del Reyda. I guess I'm sensing a theme in terms of naming. I don't know, but it is how it is. And I really appreciated just that level. So I've really loved this content, and it makes me want it everywhere. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. So for me, one of the things I saw a couple times on stream was a lot of people saying oh, you haven't cleared this yet, Brian? I'm surprised. And essentially, if you guys haven't been aware, pretty much June and July, my work schedule has been just crazy. Family life schedule, crazy. At the end of the day, working about 60, 70 hour weeks, really haven't had time to play a lot of games. Plus, when we look at the relic steps in Final Fantasy XIV for Shadowbringers, I was stuck on the Void Arc and Rabanastre runs for this content. So I was continually doing those. So I felt and purposely held off of running into Zadnor because I wanted to make sure, because I knew Zadnor had this part of the relic step attached to it. And I didn't want to find myself leveling up all the way in the zone only to have to go back and do whatever was required. And so for me, I've been able to do the double dip. Now the triple dip is what I like to, is the ideal way that I play Final Fantasy. And that's one of the strengths that Zadnor and Bozja bring, is its leveling content from 71 to 80. One change I would easily and happily make is, while this content is story gated behind the MSQ, behind the raids, I still wish that once you've got it unlocked, that they would just let you open it up to level 50. The counter argument that I always hear is that would kill Heaven on High and that would kill X. And my counter argument to that is that let people play in however they want. If they want to go to Heaven on High, go to Heaven on High. Like, I don't see these necessarily as competing pieces of content, because I think the player choice is best. And that's one of the things that Yoshi P and the team have delivered on, is player choice. You might not necessarily agree with like each and every step, but the fact that you can do as a part of the relic, go and run in Fates, go and do this piece of content, or you can go do that piece of content. I think that takes a lot of stress, a lot of pressure off of me as a player. One of the things that really took me away from Eureka is it wasn't leveling content. That was actually real critical, because I still had jobs to level up back in Stormblood. And so I ended up defaulting to that, because I knew relics tend to just become glamour. Like they have a value to you as the player, but eventually they're going to be replaced with even more powerful gear when the expansion drops. So what did I find the most value? It was leveling. Is that way, because that level, the 10 levels I put into that job will always go forward, because that's just how it works. So focusing in on leveling, I think that this is a key aspect, and I would love to see them bring that backwards into Eureka, turning Eureka into leveling content. Otherwise, at some point, I would love to see these adventurer forays, these zones, these exploration zones, became more of an alternative leveling method to that of the dungeons, that of the dailies, and etc. But ultimately, we'll have to wait and see how that goes from here. But a couple of real key highlights that I really have enjoyed about it is that this brings me back to that old school MMO feeling. Eureka invited me to go play Final Fantasy XI. When playing Eureka, I realized just how much I missed that style of content, and thus I went back and played Final Fantasy XI, because it was designed with that at the ground level. Now what Bozja does is it gives me that feeling, it gives me that ability to play with other players, and on top of that, with the critical engagements, it becomes this really excellent gameplay loop that I can have a lot of fun with, where I can either decide to focus in on a particular area within the zone, or I can continue just run back and forth, teleport every which way, and try to rack up as much material as I can. I'm still filling in so many different bars. I'm working on Relic. I'm working on now Proofs of Metal. I'm working on, like unlocking the Bozja clusters and opening up many new options for different mounts and things like that. So I feel like my time is, every little minute is being kind of ticked into multiple different boxes. I might be weird that way, but I really enjoy that style of content. So the multi-dip, I think, is a real key aspect that Bozja offers, and the options to whether you want to engage with it or you want to do something else is very helpful. One of the things I found myself back in Stormblood with Eureka saying is that if I had 3 hours, I would absolutely go spend it in Eureka. It's a beautiful zone, and I think Eureka's zones by far outweigh Zadnor's zone design. But I understand, and I actually do appreciate their zone design, but overall, you get the obviously war-torn feeling of in the trenches within Bozja and Zadnor, where in Eureka it is just beauty for beauty's sake. But anyway, the simple fact that like Eureka didn't give me those options, I felt like if I didn't have that time, and I ended up getting off that train really early, where here I'm kind of just like, okay, if I only have 15 minutes to play, 20 minutes to play, I can go do and make some progress towards my relic, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the Zadnor zone itself. So I really appreciate that. Like I said, it took me a long time to complete it. I just hit rank 25. I just finished Del Reyda for the first time, and I'm looking forward to going and spending more time in the zone. There's many things that I still have left to do, but at the end of the day, like, I'm very thrilled with this content, and it just makes my imagination and my hopes for the future Final Fantasy XIV explode in many different ways. So let's go ahead and talk about hopes for the future in this case. This is me spending theoretical dollars. It's not guaranteed whatsoever, but obviously the story sets itself up for something bigger, for another introduction, for it to be continued in certain ways. The threat of the Empire is still the threat of the Empire, and that's also has me excited to see how Endwalker and this somewhat relate. We've seen them take things like the Crystal Tower. We've seen them take things that have happened in the past that have been optional content and filter them into the story. So I do wonder if at some point these stories are going to fold together to a degree, and we're going to see something like this play into a future piece of content that's part of the MSQ, the main story quest, or if we'll see it somewhat continue as a side quest. I don't ultimately know, but at the end of the day, I really appreciated everything from the story and more. What I want to see, though, like if you were saying, Brian, if you had one wish, what would you do in this case? And well, one wish would be, I wish for many wishes, right? But I'm gonna sit here and say, like, I would die to see if they could put the this style content with the skirmishes and the critical engagements in the open world in general. And the only way I could think that they could have to do that, the only way that I think they could do that, would be to have where when you look at your data center and your worlds, that if they funneled people into the zones just like they do with Zadnor and Bozja. I think that's a real strength of the matchmaking, the fact that you're always, when every time I go in, there's always other people to play with. And the conversation, you can end up having conversations because you are going to shout for party, or when a critical engagement pops, you do end up forming these parties because the content forces you to do so. Much like the older MMORPGs, you start to see more community building around having like a goal or a task that does require more than just yourself. And while that can be uncomfortable, and I don't think that game design is going to percolate through the core game, because that essentially would really kind of break that mindset of that you can kind of play this casually. I'm not advocating for like the modern MMO design to completely go away, but I'm advocating that kind of change. It's nice to see when content is brought in, forces us together. I think that's one of the things that as players we find, hey, yeah, I really enjoy this kind of stuff. And that's usually where we see Eureka being highly praised, and Bozja and Zadnor being praised as well, because it does, I guess, facilitate the things we love about these games and its community. But those are just kind of my thoughts. That's what I've gotten written down. I would love to see obviously more of this style content brought into the core game, like I said, but I think if anything else, that's a long ways away. Yoshi P did talk about that the critical engagements require a lot of design, just like any boss fight would. And it's with those critical engagements that, yeah, like if it ends up, impacting the game, like I could see that for a bigger future at some point down the road, but there's technological hurdles they would have to overcome. Bozja Zadnor used the instance system, which has its strengths and its weaknesses, as opposed to the open world system, which we experience outside of these zones itself. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's a lot to come, a lot I want to share. I've got some updated thoughts on Phantasy Star Online 2, as I just finished the main story there as well. So that'll be coming here to the channel, guys. If you're new around here and you hadn't hit subscribe, if you feel like I earn it, hit that subscribe button, come out and check out the rest of my content. You can always unsubscribe later. Either way, it's free. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you being here. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in my next video. But until then, take care.